Good afternoon. Very nice to see all of you. My name is Evan Smith. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, and I am, like so many people here in the audience and on stage, a friend of water, or at least I aspire to be, and definitely a friend of Texas Parks and Wildlife, and am elated to have had the opportunity to be here and preside over this discussion with 6 extraordinary people, all experts on the subject we're going to discuss. This event, I think, as you know, commemorates the Parks and Wildlife Department's 10-year effort to educate Texans about the importance of water to the state's ecology and economy and way of life. That's really the subtext of everything we're going to talk about today, what you're going to see up on the screen, how important water is to our way of life. And I think this will be a realistic, hopefully optimistic and upbeat, but in any case realistic assessment of the state of the state's water from a policy standpoint, from a use standpoint, and everything in between. As I said, we're fortunate to have many great folks in the audience here to listen to our discussion. I want to acknowledge the presence of 2 elected officials. This is a tough time to be an elected official. They've got hard work to do, and we out here in the world don't always love on them the way that we should for the public service they perform. That's not a partisan deal. We should just appreciate the fact that people sacrifice a lot when they go into public service at the elected level. So let us please acknowledge State Representative Donna Howard of Austin, who is here. And I'm told a freshman member, one of the 30-odd members who were elected in November, State Representative Rodney Anderson of Dallas, I'm told, is here as well. State Representative Anderson, someplace here. Well, let's give him a hand anyway, because his name got on the paper. I understand that we will have shortly the entire Texas Parks and Wildlife Department Commission. The Parks and Wildlife Commission will be here, including Chairman Peter Holt. In their absence, let's give them a hand for the service they perform as well. We do have some here. Commissioners, if you're here, wave your hand. Let's give them a hand. They, in fact, are here. Thank you for being here. As you see up on the screens to the side, this initiative, this communications initiative and special event has been made possible by the generosity of a number of sponsors. I want to simply acknowledge them. Let's save our applause and give them a big round of applause at the end for supporting this effort. At the benefactor level, Friends of the Heart Research Institute, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, and the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority. At the patron level, the Nature Conservancy of Texas, Apache Petroleum, and Texas Monthly. At the supporting level, TCEQ, Wells Fargo, Ducks Unlimited, and the San Antonio River Authority. And at the Symposium reception sponsor level, Texas Wildlife Association, the LCRA, and the CCA. Let's give them all a hand, please, for their generosity. Now let's turn our attention to the conversation. It's going to be a good one, and I want to introduce our panelists. I'm going to go from the far side to the near side in introducing our guests. All the way on the end, almost a half mile from me, it feels like, is Dr. Larry McKinney. He is the executive director of the Heart Research Institute for Gulf of Mexico Studies, where he leads a team that integrates science, policy, and socioeconomic expertise to help assure an economically and environmentally sustainable Gulf. Previously, he spent 24 years leading environmental and fisheries programs at Texas Parks and Wildlife. To his left is Mary Kelly, an environmental lawyer with 25 years of experience in private practice and in the nonprofit sector. Previously, she was vice president for rivers and deltas at the Environmental Defense Fund and executive director of the Texas Center for Policy Studies. Next to Mary is Andy Sansom. So many of you know Andy as the executive director of the Rivers Systems Institute at Texas State University, where he coordinates university policy and research related to freshwater resources and manages the headwaters of the San Marcos rivers, among many other responsibilities. He's the former executive director of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and the former state director of the Nature Conservancy of Texas. Next to Andrew Sansom is Joe Nick Patoski, an accomplished and award-winning journalist who's been writing about water and related issues for more than a quarter century in pretty much every publication with the word Texas in its name. Texas Monthly, Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas Highways, the Texas Observer. He kind of runs the gamut. He's the author of several books, including Generations of Land, which will be published this spring by Texas A&M Press. Next to Joe Nick is David Langford, Vice President Emeritus of the Texas Wildlife Association, where he primarily works on water issues, property tax concerns, eminent domain abuses, private land stewardship challenges, and other matters. He is Vice President Emeritus, but from 1990 to 2002, he served as the Texas Wildlife Association's Executive Vice President. And then finally, a very familiar face to fans of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Carter Smith, who is the Executive Director of the Parks and Wildlife Department right now, charged with overseeing the work of 3,100 professionals in 11 different divisions, including wildlife, state parks, coastal fisheries, and island fisheries. He previously served as State Director of the Nature Conservancy of Texas. Let's give these 6 a good hand, please. So, panelists, this is a big topic. We could talk all day about it. We could talk about one slice of it all day. I want to identify certain aspects of it and throw it open to a couple of you specifically, but with the invitation for all of you to jump in if you have a point of view on it. Let's begin by talking about water as commodity as we think about the state of water in Texas today. I want to ask David and Joe Nick principally to talk about the whole conservation versus use question. Where are we and where should we be?
Boy, I don't know where to start except when I see water identified as a commodity, as a resource to be mined and marketed. I kind of draw the line as a consumer. Water is life, and water is the one thing that we can't do without. We could live without oil and gasoline, not very well, but we can get along with it. None of us can survive without water. So to see it bandied about as something that goes to the highest bidder, something to be moved and taken, whether from as groundwater or from a river or spring, I find as a consumer and user of water and a recreationalist as being something that's kind of I don't understand, and I don't like seeing it being bandied about, because all it means is less of what we have now for all of us, less of water in its natural state. I like leaving it where it is. I like seeing it come out of the ground in the spring. I like getting to recreate in a river. I love the Gulf. And all I know is without all these dynamics in place, you take from one element, you take from groundwater, you take from a spring or river, it's going to ultimately affect the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to affect our bays and estuaries. And this is something that, again, as a consumer, a user, and nothing more, it leaves me bewildered and very worried.
Now, David, we've litigated, we all can be sympathetic, I think, to Joe Nick's perspective on this, but we've litigated the question long ago whether we're going to use water. So the question is, where along the continuum is the appropriate place for us to be? Joe Nick makes a good point. This is not something you want to take for granted, because the minute you do, it goes away. So where do we come down?
Actually, it's even worse than as Joe Nick outlines. My family lives on a 6th-generation ranch, and the house was built in 1887, and it was built next to a spring. That's where the water was. So for almost a century and a half, we've been conserving water and putting it in the ground. It's in northwest Kendall County and along a creek that is a major supplier to the Guadalupe River. And our well at our house was drilled in 1960, and until 1998, the water level stayed constant. In the last 13 years, it's down over 50 feet. And we are 6 generations. All of our neighbors have been there that long. We have no irrigated agriculture. We have no subdivisions. So that groundwater that is going somewhere, and here we spend our time and devote our lives to conserving it, and somehow it goes away.
And what's your, I mean, I'm not asking you to call anybody out by name, but surely you have a theory as to what's going on here in your specific case.
Well, I would think that it's the municipalities and the cities that are drawing water that is somehow connected. I mean, it really is mysterious and occult, just like the East case said, the groundwater, but it seems pretty simple to me. If we have no industry, no development for miles in any direction, that it has to be going out somewhere downstream.
Andy, you understand, can I call you, I call you Andy in person, I call you Andy. It sounds like you're 12 years old. Andrew.
Thank you.
You're welcome. By the way, I was going to take a sip of water, but now I feel really guilty, so I'm going to just put it over there. Andrew, to David's point, you know, we are in a state that is fast growing. One of the things we brag about is how people love to come to Texas, how many people are coming to Texas every day and every week. The census figures show that we've grown enormously and that we're going to grow again, the projections say, enormously still. That runs up against what Dave was talking about, doesn't it?
Well, the bottom line is that we're going to have a doubling of our population probably by about 2040, and we have already given permission for more water to be withdrawn from many of our rivers than is actually in them. So we have a clear dilemma on our hands. I have to take a little bit of issue with what Joe Nick has said. I certainly agree with the absolute necessity for water as a life-giving substance. No other substance is as important to sustain life as water. But frankly, we waste too much of it. We waste so much water that it's almost criminal. And if you doubt that, the cities of El Paso and San Antonio have reduced their water consumption by 40% per capita, and yet have continued to grow. So we need to value it somehow more than we have in the past. While it is the one ingredient most essential to all of life, we certainly don't treat it that way in terms of the way we use it.
But Andy, what can we do about that? How can we legislate more appropriate stewardship of this dwindling resource?
Well, I think price is a part of the function. I mean, I just don't think oftentimes we value it to the extent that it should be. But a lot of this is low-hanging fruit. In San Antonio, the water mains and systems were over 100 years old, and much of that savings just came by repairing old leaks in the system. There are cities in Texas that lose up to 50% of the amount of water in their system through leaking mains and water systems.
In fact, you and I were together at an event for the Hill Country Conservancy a couple of weeks ago where you identified, I thought, Hays County specifically. You thought that in Hays County this was a problem?
And the average city in Texas loses probably 25 to 30% just simply leaking back through inefficient water mains.
Mary, come at this from the legal end. So Joe Nick doesn't like water catters, we might call them, right?
I'll come at it from the legal end, but I just want to put a little perspective on the setup here. There's these state water plans that come out every 5 years. Right. It's right, we're going to run out of water if we don't spend billions and billions of dollars. Let's put a little perspective on it. In 1968, the Texas Water Plan said we were going to run out of water in Texas by 1985 if we didn't import 12 million acre-feet from the Mississippi River. Well, we didn't import that water from the Mississippi River, and we haven't run out of water in Texas yet. So I think, and they were right on target on their population projections. It's how much each person is going to use, or how much agriculture is going to use, or how much the industry is going to use. So I think we need to, calm down and keep our perspective about this. But from the legal standpoint, the law is very clear that surface water is held in trust by the state for the public. And we have a very reasonable system of permitting around that. There's some problems with it, and there's some things we need to tinker with and fix. We're in quite a dilemma when it comes to groundwater because our law is a bit of a mess. There's a pending court case at the Supreme Court that's going to either make it easier to deal with groundwater or make it more of a mess.
But will have an impact nonetheless.
It'll have an impact. Right. But, we've had these local groundwater districts since 1949, first one created in 51. And most of them that have had a little time to get up and running are doing a great job. And I think maybe a little more support for those districts and making them work and giving them money and let them defend themselves a little better might be part of the answer.
Joe Nick, one of the pieces that you and I worked on